Hey, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I am Nerder Doug, and tonight I am here to try and solve the riddle of steel with this
What's going on, Nerdarchy Steve?
nerd. Hey, so yeah, we're talking about swords tonight, which is just sort of like a broad topic, which is a kind of sword as well in old editions of D&D, and just fun. Swords are cool, so we're like, yeah, let's talk about swords.
Yeah, I mean there's so much there, right?
Yeah,
So many stories kind of have featured swords, and like when we brought this up, I'm like instantly things started jumping into my mind, right?
sure.
The sword of power, sword of omens, black razors,
Mm-hmm.
stormbringer, narsil, sting, right? From
Yeah.
all different tropes, right? Even oh shoot, what was the sword from Thundar the Barbarian?
Did it have a name, or was it just called like the Sword of Light, I think, or something like that, maybe?
They call it something.
Excalibur.
Yeah, obviously Excalibur. Like there's so many, and then it got me thinking. I was like, well, what about my own games, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like, there's definitely been a few over the years. Like very very early on, one of Ted's characters, his undead slayer, it got Alana Patois, which was a +0, +4 versus undead silver longsword.
I always like those kind of things.
And so I mean, like, again, that was a campaign that died out, but the sword was going to have this. Like, I had an arc planned for the sword. I don't know if it
Mm-hmm.
was planned for the players or not, but the concept behind the sword was, it was actually, it needed to be awakened.
Okay.
So it was vaguely magic, but to fully come into its own power. And I don't even remember if I came up with the story elements, but he was going to have to kill a vampire lord in order to fully awaken the sword and unlock all of its power.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something they kind of got early on, and then it was usually just kind of a regular sword, except for occasionally, is super OP. If he was fighting undead, but which, I mean, that was his character's thing, so he was down
Did you
with that.
guys fight a lot of undead in that campaign?
Yes, there was quite a bit. Like, his character had actually fled his homeland of Karshapathion, where a plague of undead had swept through.
Wow, you
And
guys have been playing in that same setting since that back then. That was in like second edition, wasn't it, or third edition?
yeah, it was we started with second edition, and
Wow.
fragments and elements of it have come.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like,
sure.
so like, he had fled his homeland because the elven queen had been put to sleep magically by one of the undead, and he was looking for a cure. And like, one of the very first adventure, I think, was, it was just like a mine had been overrun and overtaken by undead, but it turns out it was just like a necromancer that was using the undead to mine the silver from the mine.
Oh, okay. Nice.
uh
Yeah. They don't complain. They don't pay them. No
you don't gotta pay, yeah,
unionize.
right, no,
No breaks.
you pesky unions trying to form, none of that. um Yeah, so I would say there were undead in that campaign. We kicked it right
Sure.
off. That necromancer kept kind of like getting away and resurfacing.
Undead are like the one of the best just at
Yeah.
monster types because it's like you just never have to feel bad or wonder. It's like it's just the right thing. Like yeah, like
And in my
totally is.
mind, the necromancer, he looked like Ric Flair, dressed all in white robes.
Back in the day, I believe Ric Flair was disguised as a character called the Scorpion to mess with Sting, and he used to wear black robes to the ring and stuff. I mean, everybody knows Ric Flair, but
Yeah.
in the um, but yeah, I mean, the sword. It's funny. I was thinking, about some points leading into this, and it's like it's kind of just like the best overall weapon in a way. It's sort of like the Mario of weapons because it's like, I mean, it's just ubiquitous. Like swordsmen, people set out to be, master sword skills. Nobody's like, I'm going to set out to be the world's greatest mace wielder, or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, they do, but it's, do you think it's because it's sort of like it's sort of like the gun of the melee weapons sort of thing. Like you just put it in somebody's hands and they can probably mess somebody up with it. Whereas like, other weapons, you might need a little more.
Like, I think the sword was more of the skilled warrior's tool, right? Where
I mean, amongst warrior tools, sorry, I should have clarified. Yeah, I mean, like when you're raising the common rabble, it's like here's a long pointy stick.
Well, yeah, but they never really advanced beyond the long pointy stick until you got guns. Spears never became obsolete, right? They were just the perfect. But again, like they also worked much better when you had a bunch of people together.
Yeah,
But I think the sword was just a utilitarian weapon of a warrior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it required more skill and knowledge to use.
Okay.
I think that's also why like crossbows overtook longbows, because longbows required a lot of skill.
You don't even need proficiency with a crossbow.
Yeah, you just point and shoot, right? It was the first gun.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's funny when I was a stupid kid, when I was a teenager, and I was like, I want to get a crossbow with a laser sight, and the guy looked at me like I had a mental deficiency, and he's like, "Why? You just point, and the crossbow goes exactly where you point
it." Yeah, but it's a laser. Who doesn't want a laser?
But it's a laser.
Yeah. Don't you get it, man? I had a hand crossbow when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it was fun.
Did you ever shoot your brother with it?
No, I used to play around with that kid, my friend Aaron, who's now that Guinness Book World Record.
He's the whipmaster.
Yeah, whipmaster and juggler. We used to just pretend we were adventurers and shoot at trees and his side of his garage and everything, put holes in all over stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we ever really got our hands on anything much deadlier than a BB gun. Fireworks.
Nobody had any head of it.
Fireworks eventually. That was bad enough.
You know what else? Like swords are even in some ways maybe even like more badass when they show up in like sci-fi stories and stuff too, when there's like ray guns and everything. It's like that dude's got a sword, like, oh man, watch out for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just finished watching the Book of Boba Fett.
Okay.
And pretty famous sword shows up in that one.
Yeah. That's a great thing. I didn't even think of Star Wars, but I was just thinking like
lightsabers, and then I don't know. Is it too soon to drop a Book of Boba Fett spoilers?
I don't know. I don't think so. Go for it.
If I say spoilers first, it makes it all.
Then that's okay. Then you're beyond reproach.
Yeah. So like the dark sword gets introduced.
Yeah.
Into in the Book of Boba Fett. So.
Mm-hmm. And that's like. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but like even in that story, right? Like, it completely like changes the tone of the story, and becomes like its own character, right? When you introduce something like that into it.
Well, a prominent sword can often do that in stories, like we were saying, from fiction and our own games. It's funny. I've played so many D&D games. So I was thinking back, like, have I had any characters with any prominent swords? And actually, not that I can really remember in recent memory. In Ted's Dungeons and Delvings game, the character was like just a sword fanatic who just loved swords and wanted to become awesome. Yeah, awesome at sword play, which was a really fun character to play. I flavored all her spells like sword themed and visually. And she carried that two-handed sword, was not proficient. It had no proficiency in it. So, well, you just don't get your proficiency bonus. And I didn't use it that often. It was kind of just like, I just liked carrying it. I mean,
yeah.
But sometimes I did.
Cast animate object on it.
Yeah. I could do that at some point. But I also took that martial adept feat, so I could. It's like, well, maybe she'd have like one move, and I thought, like, maybe that would just be like a surprise factor. Bust out like a fancy sword move sometime.
They'll never see it coming. This great giant two-handed sword on your back. They'll never see.
It's funny. Brian Smith mentions none of the players even use a sword. They're all artificers and magic weirdos. There's something about like when you play D&D a lot, You
Yeah.
start, thinking like a lot of our character builds. It's like, well, how can I make like this crappy weapon awesome? Because I want to be good with like a whip or a morning star, or like a flail or something like that. But I gotta say, at the end of the day, I often find comfort in totally when I play like new games that I don't know, even if they're fantasy. Like I don't know the rules. Just a sword and board fighter is my go-to. Because you can't go wrong with a sword in one hand and shield in the other.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty solid. Armor class is pretty consistent.
Hmm.
For the game as well, and also like if you take dueling, your damage isn't off by that
Yeah.
much, and your lower damage tends to be a little bit higher. Although in 5e, I have not used many sword wielders. Great axes, an anchor.
Really?
So,
Yeah. Oh yeah. These guys started that. Did you just play that like a couple days ago? Was that this week?
Friday, yeah, last
Yeah.
Friday we started that game.
How did that go? Any prominent sword wielders in that
My wife's
party?
character is a swashbuckler,
Oh yeah,
and she's using a rapier.
like you do.
Like you do. We got a paladin. I don't know what the paladin fights with though. I feel like the paladin fights with a sword and border, but I really feel like that character should fight with a trident.
That's a cool weapon. Is that what do you call it? Versatile? Can you use it in one or two hands?
I think you can. I mean, I think they're lame one-handed. Well,
Yeah, if you had a shield.
Both, but I just feel like both the spear and the trident kind of got the short stick. But yeah, they're playing an Oath of the Sea Paladin
Nice.
to our evil sea deity, even though I don't think they're particularly evil per se.
Well,
which kind of came up.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're talking about like the gap between like a deity and a mortal who pays them respect, it's just like, I mean, for instance, if that's the only sea deity or the main one, it's just like, hey man, whether they're evil or good, it's just like, I don't want them turning their evil on me while I'm on the sea. So
yeah.
I
well, yeah. So respect. That's like our sea god, like many sea gods, is kind of dark and vengeful.
Sure.
But also like Pratima's character is doing the Matoya thing, and looking for the from Princess Bride. Matoya, what's his name?
Indigo.
Indigo Matoya. That's it. Indigo Matoya. I think I'm dyslexic because I wanted to reverse those.
No, you said it. Yeah, I just didn't make the connection.
Yeah. So she's kind of doing that, and she's a newer player. Like my wife is a newer player too. So it was actually kind of cool because like when we started the game, I don't think there was a declared deity, but basically because of like things that were happening in the game, and it comes out that she's kind of on this vengeance quest, and the sea god is a god of vengeance, and she's an Oath of the Sea Paladin, and then there was we got like our ship got overtaken by this cursed storm. That was actually I think it was sent by the evil deity Malice Destria, right? Which is like the opposite evil god of the artifact we're carrying, Adalin. They're supposed to be siblings in the lore. But but no one really likes Maltritus, but Maltritus absolutely hates Malice Destria, so it works out kind of really well that she decided to be a paladin of that. So after the storm, there was one of the after effects of the storm was like these magical scrying words that were left on the ship. And her character was able to act like Ted had her do like a ritual to cleanse the ship. So yeah, which was pretty cool. So
that sounds like a pretty awesome first session.
It was. So it started off with like a big skill challenge.
Oh yeah, to
survive the storm.
Oh, that was how it started. Oh, that's great. I like starts like that where there's like a lot of stuff.
Well, he didn't do the media res thing, but like after a little bit, that's what ended up happening. Lost a couple crew members, as you do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, whenever I see like even real life, storms and like how you see those ships that are like a fishing ship's like almost like vertical and a huge wave. It's like that is scary as shit. And add in like, it's caused by like a chaos storm or like a gab. It's like, oh man, that'd be really terrifying.
Yeah, So basically,
That
like,
sounds like really exciting
when the
game.
runes were like wiped out on the ship, a big wave came over and slammed down on the deck and like clawed them away.
Okay.
But then like in the distance, like there was this giant shark that looked like it had like tiger stripe markings, but then if you look at the markings, they weren't tiger stripe markings; they were tridents. Um,
Okay.
and
Was it like in the wave? You could see it like.
and I kind of just did the
Oh.
like the breaching thing, the
Do you ever
dolphin
see that?
thing.
Like when people see like a whale in a
Oh
huge
yeah,
wave. It's like,
that is crazy. Or the surfer with the shark.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sea is pretty scary. Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked about living on a boat as the topic, it was just like selling the sizzle was a big part of it. Somebody in this chat mentioned Brian Smith. The coolest aspect of a sword is the sword duel. Oh hell yeah! There's so many interesting things you could do like that in an RPG game. But how do you think you would involve the other characters that weren't involved in a sword duel? Like if you were going to have something like that, kind of just cut back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, it is
less like a
difficult.
round by round initiative and more just like a scene by scene thing.
I think the cutting back and forth is the best thing you can do as far as keeping everyone involved.
Yeah.
It's all those situations are always really tough. I've seen Guy Slanders do it where he did like the full initiative and would just go through, and he managed to finagle it really well. But
that could be a good way to just keep it like under control. I mean, even if it's not like technically like a 6-second round, it's like, okay, now it's your turn. Like, what are you doing?
But like, if you want to make it interesting, right? And say like it's an actual duel and there's a crowd around, right? If you want to allow the crowd to have an effect on the fight and the outcome, like either demoralizing the opponent or demoralizing the player, it might be cool to like do the round by round, but like have the players that are in the crowd work in the crowd.
Oh yeah,
and if
for
they
sure.
do well, like it'll give some kind of
making
advantage.
signs.
Yeah, if they do well, it gives some kind of advantage to the
Sure.
your guy in the fight. If they do poorly, maybe it gives them some kind of disadvantage or gives the other duelist an advantage.
Now I'm thinking about duels, and I know we have a duelist character build guide. Yes, it is the ultimate duelist. It was do you remember this one? It was a Lightfoot halfling, charlatan background, swashbuckler samurai. That's
definitely
cool.
Not Oliver de Barrows.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was from a book, wasn't it? Like Forgotten Realms novel.
Crimson Shadow, R.A. Salvatore novels. He was one of the supporting characters. He was a highway halfling that was also kind of a swashbuckler and duelist that fought with a rapier, and he would carve the O onto his enemies, kind of like the Zorro thing.
Yeah, like Zorro. Okay.
Like Zero, but he's always like, "Don't make me carve my whole name into you." It's a very long
oh, nice. Yeah, swords are just, I mean, there's so much variety. I'm just thinking like short swords, rapiers, two-handed swords, long swords, just like scimitars. I mean, just a variety, like all over, even in, I mean, in our games, we often, draw inspiration from real life. Just in the real world, like every culture at some point had some kind of handled, one-handed or two-handed bladed stick, right? Even I never remember how to pronounce it, but even that like Aztec thing, I guess that would kind of fall under sword, right? I mean, it's kind of like a chopping thing, but
it starts
with still slice with it. Yeah. I'm never sure how to pronounce it.
It's in buggy. Is it bugging out? Is that
feeling buggy?
Feeling buggy that has one of those in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, they're definitely pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere on Earth, really, that I can think of, that had some kind of sword weapon. South America, North America, Europe, Asia.
Brian Smith says, "Is it too cheese-tastic if a master sword dueler bad guy has a group of wide stun type moves? It may or may not get off on the others."
Absolutely not. I don't think. I mean,
it's all about balancing the monster you're building, right? Because they're the NPC.
Yeah.
you know, we like building our NPCs so they have effects that are different
Yes.
from just like, oh, here's a thing that everybody can do. And really, I mean, we didn't invent that. We took inspiration from the original Curse of Strahd adventure
Mm-hmm.
for 5e, where with the NPCs in there, they started with, it's not just like we're going to recreate a fighter from the player's handbook, or they built them from the ground up like a monster, like Ismet with the demon arm that could do like fire damage and throw fireballs, and
Yeah.
what is the other
I never
guy?
understood that with DMs. It's like, do you just want to be a player
Yeah.
so bad that I mean, it's like you don't have to do that. Like you, you just give them whatever powers you want.
I mean, in third edition, it kind of was cool and made sense for that time period of the game, right? Because like the game was kind of like evolving and growing.
But monsters still had like unique, like spell like abilities or whatever.
Sure, but third edition systematized everything, so that's why it kind of made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then with 4e, they kind of did away with they still systematized it, but in a much different way. And then
Yes,
5e is
a
kind
much
of like
better way.
a kind of a combination of that.
So I looked up the Ultimate Duelist. I guess this is sort of answered that question. Because I was like, what does our duelist do? Because the idea was like, well, even if they're facing a group of people, the duelist wants to just pick somebody and duel them, right? So,
Yeah.
so our duelists, let's see, they do extra damage when they hit with their weapon. That's just a static ability. When they make a melee attack against a creature, that creature can't make opportunity attacks against it for the rest of its turn, so it can get around the battlefield. While it is wearing light or no armor or wearing no shield, it's got the swashbuckler thing, charisma to AC. It has an action called Fighting Spirit. 3 times a day, it can give itself advantage on all weapon attack rolls until the end of the current turn.
Yeah, so that stuff
When it
is
does so, it also gains 10 temporary hit points, and then it has parry.
yeah, that's just
Reaction.
mashing some of the swashbuckler and samurai abilities.
Oh, is that Fighting Spirit? Yeah, I guess this was a
Yeah.
pretty early one back when
Yeah.
we were sort of doing that. But even still, you can see that, it doesn't have to stun everybody if you think about like the action economy and just sort of like a chess game. Imagine what it would be like. It's like, well, I want to be able to get out of the way, but you don't want to be hit, and really put the hurt on whoever they choose to.
Like you could
duel.
you could even do things like combine like fighting with a sword with martial arts, the open way of the open hand martial arts, where it's
Yeah.
like
Oh
when
yeah,
you do
yeah.
this thing, you can also do this other thing, and you can choose from a menu, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
knock them prone, disarm them, push them back, so you have a little bit of a control effect as well.
Yeah. But you could also do, I mean, if it was a high level thing too, it's like, I've seen plenty of clips of like anime sword battles where it's, where like their sword clashes are like shattering buildings and stuff like that. And yeah, I think like, hey, if you're an 18th, 19th level fighter, that's probably what it's like. So, I mean, facing somebody who could just like, swing their sword fast enough to like stun 3 people for the round and just get them out of the way so it can get after you. It doesn't seem unreasonable.
That is one of the fun things about Mutants and Masterminds, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted to build a swordsman character in that system, like you would just pick the effect, and the effect would be a damage effect that affects an area, and then you would just add descriptors to it. And if you're using a sword, it might be slashing or piercing, and that would just represent you running up there and slashing everybody in that area, and then they would all have to like make saving throws
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
avoid the damage.
In the chat, they sort of answered their own question about Get the Yankees silver swords. But, that opens the whole Pandora's box too of like, you can, I mean, any weapon, certainly, but I mean, a sword, you can have it do all kinds of weird things. Like maybe it can sever your connection, to your soul or something like that. Or, I
Yeah,
mean,
like Doc, like a lot of the Doc Strange or anything involving Doc Strange in the Marvel MCU, where he knocks your astral form out of your body.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could do stuff like that, or even like you mentioned earlier with the dark saber. Previously, like a lightsaber was like the most badass, weapon in the galaxy. It's like now this comes along, and it's like, oh, it can block lightsabers, and in some ways, it's more powerful than them, and stuff like that. There's always a better
Not
sword.
only that, it makes your posters look really cool.
Yeah, and or disgusting, depending on where you're at.
There's that too.
But also, I didn't see it, but I believe didn't it have some sort of like almost like magical quality to it, in that like it got heavier if you didn't do
Yeah,
something
yeah.
or
If
wield
you
it
fought
correctly.
against the blade, like the blade became harder and harder to use. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of where I left off, where Mando was like trying to use the blade, but the more he uses it, the more he fights against it, and the harder it is for him to wield.
Is it like a sentient thing, or is it just like you have to be Yeah.
N-
I,
um,
like, cause Star Wars doesn't really have, there's usually some sort of scientific explanation, even in like the quasi mystical force to some extent.
yeah. So they haven't really completely explained it, other than the armor is like you're fighting against the sword, until you're able to, until you're able to like, I forget exactly what she said.
Basically like a tune to it, right? Like maybe it's
Yeah,
just. I mean, they're powered by. Is it powered by like a kyber crystal? Or did they?
they don't say, but I assume it is, because
Yeah.
it is a
So maybe it's
lightsaber.
just like a weird kyber crystal that's like, you have to sort of like get used to it or wield
It's
it a certain way.
broken. It just really
Yeah.
needs to be repaired.
But at the end of the day, yeah. I mean, I guess the point was just like, I mean, you can attribute a lot of like unusual and intriguing qualities on a sword. Even the Dragosino one from your game too. It's not super powerful, but it's like people recognize it, and like it's a
It's got a cultural
important relic.
significance.
Yeah,
Yeah, like, yeah, Ted was afraid to display it when he went to the city where
yeah,
it's from, because he's like, I don't want them to take my sword. So,
yeah. And that's I mean, those are the best kind of
yeah.
magic items and swords, right? Where it's just like it's evoking like the players to do different things because they have them. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we had that one most recently, and then during the Scarlet Sisterhood, Last Breath, was around for a long, huge portion of that
mhm.
campaign.
Yeah, and all of those will be in the Mage Forge too. Um, I was thinking about that earlier when we started talking, because you said something about a vampire. Oh, you're talking about Ted's undead
Yeah,
character, undead slayer. And I did one of those Mage Forge mastery posts today for that Bloodstain crown, and I decided an appropriate monster would be a vampire, because they have to do it with blood and stuff like that.
nice. Yeah, I mean, I like stuff like that. That kind of like you can use it to build out your world too, right? Like,
Hmm. Yeah,
even like a Wheel of Time, and they have the what is it, the Heron Mark blades?
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
They're
That
not,
Rand has.
yeah, they're not magical. They're just really well made, and it means something if you see somebody
Hmm.
with that sword.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, for sure.
So that's just another element you can kind of add to your games. You know, I think like we would even do things like certain kingdoms were kind of renowned for their steel.
Hmm.
So people would want weapons from those places, as opposed to others, and they have an official stamp of the kingdom.
Yeah, I just was thinking of the Kill Bill movies. It's like swords feature pretty prominently in that too. And I mean, like a big part of the movie is the protagonist like seeking to get a special sword, because she is going to need it to face her enemies. And it
Well,
wasn't magical or anything either, but like you said, it was just like a super well made sword. So in a non fantasy setting, that could totally be a thing, or even a fantasy setting, it'd just be a special material or whatever.
could be special material.
Or you could just do GM fiat, where it's like you just can't beat this guy with a regular sword. Like you try and it just doesn't work for what It's like
I
you can do
used
that kind of
to
stuff.
I used to agonize over masterwork weapons in 5e,
Mhm.
which I haven't
Yeah.
introduced them, but like I came to grips with it, and really they're actually like, I overcomplicate it. You could literally treat them like magic weapons with a bonus to hit and damage, but they're not magic. So like they would still be really good. Maybe even better
Didn't
in some ways.
Masterwork just have like +1 to hit, but not the damage?
Yeah, a lot of times it was something like that. But I think for 5e, I would make it real simple and be like +1 to hit and damage. You could
But it's
even
not
do
magical.
but it's not magical. And you could even do different degrees with that. And what that would mean is, like, most of the time it is much better than using things, maybe even better than some magic weapons. But when you face something that requires a magic weapon to overcome resistance, or an immunity, no matter how nice your blade is, it still doesn't overcome that, right? So and you're still better off with the magic weapon when those come up.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, that's why fighters often had a golf bag of weapons, because, like, like that Undead Slayer, it's like, oh, what are these giants? Hold on. Oh, get one for that. It's like, it's +0 against other stuff, but it's +4 against giants. Let's do this.
Ted usually, that particular character carried bludgeoning weapons, edged weapons, piercing weapons, depending on what kind of undead they were going against.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I used to, everybody did, and it's funny, Robin and I were just sort of touching on this the other day. We were chatting, because I was going over one of the posts and said something about like skeletons being, like they used to be basically like resistant to piercing weapons.
Yeah.
But she had they had written like that, like there's no such, none such stuff in 5e. And I was like, yeah, there is, which people often forget is that they're vulnerable to bludgeoning weapons.
Yes. Yeah.
But they're so easy. It's just like, whatever, man. My sword will smash. You can just smash through those old bones too, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, we only got like 8 hit points. Like my strength bonus can practically kill these things. Actually, probably do better off punching him if you're like a strong character than even swinging your sword, because your fist is bludgeoning.
It is, but it only does a point, so it only do 2, I guess.
Doesn't it do 1d4 now or something like that?
No, you need Tavern Brawler or...
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
you need something to upgrade it.
Oh, right.
But if you did have Tavern Brawler, you would definitely probably be better off. Or if you had the unarmed fighting style, which is a die 6 or die 8, depending. Die 6 or die 8.
How does it work? What do you mean? You can...
If you don't have a shield in your hand or another weapon and you fight,
then you fight like Captain Kirk.
But I don't take it that way. Everyone knows
you give him a double axe handle.
You have the double axe handle. That is the only way in my games you get the die 8. Anything else?
If you don't, you karate chop. You gotta karate chop them.
I love the meme with the Captain Kirk fighting style.
Yeah.
It's peak Star Trek.
Transforming. So, boy, Brian Smith's just a treasure trove of sword trivia and knowledge. Yeah, I mean, just thinking, like, it's just never ending. I mean, there was that Soul Calibur game, which, like, the whole plot of the game revolved around like basically a sentient sort of demonic sword that often, changed its form and stuff like that. That was held by Cervantes, who was like an undead pirate guy. Did you ever play that game? It was like a fighting game back in the day.
I have probably definitely played it, but I have no idea what any of the storyline was. That's the one where the one character has the chain sword.
Yeah. And it comes out like a whip and stuff. And there's like the creepy guy with like the blindfold and the like clawed hands, and he's always like skittering around and stuff. And there's, of course, like samurais and stuff. Yeah, I mean, just to go straight, you, swords, people just love swords. One thing I'm kind of disappointed in myself is that, especially now that I've been like a homeowner for 2 years, 3 years, 2 or 3 years.
You don't have any swords?
I don't have a sword. I was like, I need a sword in my house.
What if someone breaks into your house? What are you going to do, man?
That actually, you know what? When I used to live in California in Big Bear, my friend had a ninja sword, and we had it on the mantle. And this like sketchy guy that he worked with came over one night, or it was in the day, but like we made a big point. We're like, yeah, well, check this out. And we were like, shing, it's just like showing us, that we had it and stuff. Because we were just like, like maybe it intimidated him, but then later we're like, what if he comes back and breaks in to steal that? Because it's pretty sweet ninja sword.
Yeah,
But
my
yeah, I need a
grandfather.
sword. I don't know. I often hem and haw about it. It's like I shouldn't invest in like a sword, a house sword. I need something to display here. Do you have a sword in your place? Probably got a couple, right?
No, I got an axe
Yeah.
not too far away though.
Oh yeah, an axe, like a
It is.
like a fantasy-esque axe, or just like a wood cutting axe.
No, it's fantasy esque. Let's see. Can I
Is it like all
reach?
Nordic looking? That'll be next week's check topic. Axes.
It's just out of reach.
Ah,
I also
okay.
have a flail too, although they're replicas. They're not actual weapons.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you know.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's got like the scroll work on the blade and stuff.
Yeah, and then
That'll be next week's
I got
topic.
my halfling suit of armor. I got my halfling suit of armor over in the corner there. He's got a sword.
A halfling suit of armor.
Yeah, he was probably on some of the live chats when I used to do them before. In the corner, I had this
Oh, really?
halfling sized suit of armor, and he had
You
a
know,
sword. My wife found it. It was a roadside find for like $20. It's like either aluminum or tin, but it's like this 3 foot tall armored soldier.
um, let's see. Boy, yeah, there's a lot. It's mostly just a few people in the chat, but they are 11 swords tonight. Let's see.
Steel Wind Strike is one of my favorite spells of all time.
Yeah, you got to cast that with what's his name, right?
Uthengar, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was probably like a turning point for you. Yes.
Yeah, well, when Xanathars came out and I found that spell, I was like, oh
Yeah.
man. Especially being a fighter with action surge doing that two rounds in a row.
Oh yeah.
What
was that?
So that spell is a little tricky, right? Because it's most effective when you have 5 enemies.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out how to get advantage on your attacks, so you can roll 2d20s for each. So you're rolling so many that you're probably going to get at least one crit, and each hit is.
There's a warlock, otherworldly patron on our site called the Broken Pact Warlock. That I think one of their abilities is basically like one of their main features is you just can kind of like store up inspiration and hand it out. So if you had one of those in your party, they could just be like, here, take it.
Feed them.
Somebody mentioned gun blades from Final Fantasy. Yeah, there's things like that in real life. I know I've seen like old timey versions of those
Axes.
that are probably like pretty crude, and I'm 100% sure people in modern day have made like pretty slick versions of that. But I mean, yeah, does it get much better than that for a warrior? It's just like, I got a gun and it's a sword.
In your quest game, like my character used the flintlock pistol he used was also an axe.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it had like an axe kind of bayonet type of thing.
And they were just like images I found like online.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, the actual pictures of it too.
Yeah.
Sword canes. People just make swords into everything, right?
Yeah.
Double underscore. There's somebody I haven't seen in a while. Says, do we have a favorite spell? Sword related spell. I mean, those are both cool. Shadow Blade, Sword Burst. I know it sounds stupid, but it's like Tabitha had it. I didn't really use it all that much because I just fell into the spamming Eldritch Blast is the way to go with this character class. But that being said, I imagine that looked like a bunch of swords as well. So I'd say my favorite sword spell was Eldritch Blast.
Uthengar went through a sword burst phase.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just useful if you were in a very target-rich environment because it hits everything around you.
And it looks like a bunch of spells or swords.
It looks like a bunch of swords. Yeah, what more could you want? My grandfather served in World War II, and he brought back a Japanese naval officer's sword.
Oh, nice.
Unfortunately, it got stolen when the
really?
house robbery. But
Oh
yeah, I
man.
mean, it was probably pretty valuable just because it was a World War II artifact.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the things I don't know if they ever got it appraised or not. But one of the things what they would do with those blades is they would rehandle them. So
Hmm.
like if it was something that was handed down through the family, it's possible that by the time you got into like the World War II era, like that blade could have been around for a while, and it had been rehandled for for the military service.
Um, that comment about different swords existing to defeat others just it makes me think of first edition speed factor and stuff.
Oh yeah, I for some reason I just think of the Kopesh for some right away.
Oh yeah, that's a unusual sword, right?
Yeah,
It's
but it
got it's
was
almost like
designed.
a oh go ahead.
Well, it was designed to hook, right? I think that's what it was. But also the it was also a cutting edge. So
Yeah, it's kind of like an axe, right? Like I mean,
inverted
in the
axe.
sense that like you chop with,
Yeah. Well, it was a crescent, and in the crescent was the blade, but it was a
yeah,
sword.
the crescent, the blade was in the
It
inside.
was on the inside because
Oh,
it was the point,
oh
the
yeah,
edge,
that's what
and then it came around and down. But it
the
was to go around shields
yeah,
and to hook and also
and
like
horsemen,
disarm.
yeah, like pull
And I think
horsemen off.
and I think to pull horsemen off.
What did Dothraki use those in Game of Thrones?
Yes, yeah.
Um, Brian Smith asks, "What's more iconic in fantasy, swords or dragons?" Care to weigh in?
Uh, I feel like the sword is more universal.
Yeah, same here.
But the dragon is more iconic.
True. Yeah, that's yeah. Okay, good point. Yeah, yeah. Because like yeah, swords are universal. Like I said, they're even like Dune.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
has swords. I mean, sci-fi things.
Like there, if you have an image with a warrior fighting a dragon, he's probably carrying a sword.
Yeah, it's probably not like Morning Star.
Yeah. Well, back in the old days, you couldn't have edged weapons, so
Yeah,
you had to stick with your mace.
yeah. I guess it's sort of like in some ways it's the simplest kind of weapon, and it's sort of like elevated through both skill wielding it and crafting it, right? Because like at the end of the day, it's just like a sharp piece of metal. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? But it's like, but in the hands of a skill, if you like to your point earlier, it's like, well, if you're trained and skilled, then it becomes much more deadly. And if somebody folds the steel better or uses steel instead of iron, or if it's in a fantasy set or even sci-fi setting, like some other mineral or even real life. I mean, a titanium sword was
I
probably
just
better than
like
like an iron wrought one.
I just like the katana people fighting with everybody else about swords.
What?
The katana people fighting with everybody else about swords. Because if I guess like sometimes I'll watch like some of the other YouTube channels that are more like medieval weaponry.
Uh-huh. Oh,
There's
okay.
there's like three of them, right? That are pretty popular. I guess there's
Mm-hmm.
Shadversity. There's
Lindy Beige.
Lindy Beige, and then Skell something or other.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. I like that channel. Yeah,
yeah.
I've
So
seen a
and
few of those. Yeah, I mean, I don't
inevitably
remember
they'll
the name.
talk about a sword, and then like the katana people come out of the woodwork, and then they like slap them down.
What they like the katana's the best sword.
Yeah. But all the European like swords guys always say they're like junk. But I think part of it was because in Japan they just didn't have good steel. Like the one of the reasons why they had to fold the steel is because they didn't have good steel.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know them. I know about a lot of swords, but I don't know like
Yeah,
the deep lore,
yeah.
or like science of it.
But the German longsword katana, they can't stand up to the sword of power.
Yeah,
All blades shatter against that.
that's a He-Man sword, right?
That is the He-Man sword.
What do you think's a cool, better or more powerful sword? The sword of power, or the sword of omens, or the sword of plunder? Yeah, let's throw down let's throw out some. Yeah, we got lightsabers are in there.
You got Stormbreaker.
Excalibur. Yeah, Stormbringer.
What I say?
Who would come out on top?
Oh man, there are so many good ones, and someone did supply the name of the Thundar sword. They call it the Lantean.
Was it, I saw that comment earlier. Was that what that was? The Atlantean?
Yeah, I think that's what that was referencing to.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard because it all depends who the writer is, right? I feel like.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about the Sword of Power or Sword of Omens, like they literally are just plot devices. They can do whatever needs to be. Do you need to move the moon or something?
Actually, interestingly enough, the first, not the first post I wrote for Nerdarchy, the website, but the first one anybody asked me to write was about the Sword of Omens, to D&Dize it.
Yeah.
And I went deep. I was like, okay, I got an assignment, me. So I just took a big bit into it. But it's actually the Eye of Thundera that is much more powerful in doing all this. The sword does do stuff and it's powerful, but the eye is the thing that it can crack a planet in half, and
Lionel is definitely like the SO of the DM. Because he's got all the best magic items.
He's got the claw, the eye, the sword.
Yeah. So clearly, like he's dating the DM. That's the only way. He's got 3 artifacts.
Everybody had something, but yeah, he had a bunch. Well, he was the leader of the Thundercats.
Yeah, nepotism at its worst.
He was actually like a child in a man's body too. Do you remember that?
Yeah, because he woke up in cryogenic sleep.
Yeah.
Which, it slowed them down, but he was the only one that really grew.
Yeah, because I was like Kit and Kat were still kids and stuff.
Yeah, I think they're just terminally little, right? Like Snarf.
Yeah, that was Lionel's babysitter, nurse,
Danny,
or whatever it was.
Nurse
Nanny, yes.
Yeah. As you do. Yeah, also so folks had mentioned the silver swords up above, and the fact that you can if you are astrally projected into the astral plane. Mm-hmm. I think if on a crit, they just sever your cord and you're just
Yeah. Ted and I looked that up and we were like, what does it do? Are you floating adrift, or can you find your way back to the body? And it's like, yep, no. It's pretty definitively you're dead.
You're dead. Yeah. I had looked it up for the Astral Dreadnought because it has that same ability.
Oh yeah.
But I'm pretty sure when we talked about the Gith previously, if you defeat a Gith raiding party, there's a chance that you find a silver sword, which is kind of cool. But then also it becomes this magnet for a Gith to never stop coming to try and kill you and take it back.
And though, I mean, at the same time, unless you're planning forays into the astral plane, I mean, it's just a +3 greatsword, right? Which is awesome, but that's all it it doesn't do anything else, right?
I think it does psychic damage.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. I also, in all fairness, I think there's different versions.
Yeah, true. Well. And that's always been a Gith thing, even in first edition when they showed.
But even if
folio.
But even if you have just the basic version, it's got significance to.
Yeah. Oh, right.
It's got a lot of significance to them culturally, and they are just against anyone that's not them wielding it. So
that's kind of what I guess I was roundabout. What I was getting to was just it's not worth that for just a +3 greatsword. So you know what I mean? Sure, and every so often, people might just materialize from the astral plane to kill me. I mean, I
guess it depends on how attached you are.
I don't know if it gets into specifically, but when you're in the another plane and you go to the material plane,
yeah.
Is there can they just choose where, or can you see into the? I guess that's what's an ethereal sight. You can see, because it's man, if you have enemies that can do that kind of stuff, you're got to be one paranoid MFer in those worlds. They can just go back and forth between the astral plane and see me in the real world when they're there. You're never safe. If you run afoul of a night hag or something.
There's a greater
Good luck.
silver sword. It's a legendary item.
Oh,
Requires attunement by a creature that has Sonic ability. It
okay.
has a +3 bonus to attack and damage rolls. While you hold the sword, you have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, charisma saving throws. You're immune to being charmed, and you have resistance to psychic damage. In addition, if you score a critical hit with it against the creature's astral body, you can cut the silvery cord that tethers their target to the material body instead of dealing damage. So, yeah.
Well, you can do that even on the material plane?
Nah, I think that's only
Oh,
actual.
I was like,
Their
oh,
body would
man.
have to be separated from their
Oh.
actual form would have to be separated.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Another cool. I mean, this isn't limited to swords, but like certainly naming of swords or weapons is a long tradition in fantasy literature and games. I done that myself with Vent. He started off. No, that's right. Yeah, I abandoned that because I couldn't use my bonus action to do my special ability, so I just went with them all. But for a while, he was going two-handed.
Yeah, it's so hard.
He had claw and bite.
Yeah.
Name for the dragon attacks.
What did Tabitha name her sword? I feel like she would have named her sword.
No, she was just an amnesiac who woke up with that sword and just figured she must be a sword master, and that's why she carried it around. Or it must have some significance, but she didn't know what it was.
Brian Smith, the Vorpal sword ability to just behead on a 20 is great and flavorful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, unless you're the character that just got beheaded. It kind of sucks.
Well, I mean, adventuring ain't easy, man.
No. Isn't there a saving throw now, though? Or is it? I don't think
probably. Wimps.
Yeah, not like the old days where it's just like, oh, and you're dead.
I mean, as much as I get attached to characters and I love them, it's just like, whatever. I mean, that stuff happens, man. There's a world where there's swords that could just behead you. What's the other one? A sword of sharpness?
There's no save.
Oh, good.
Sword of sharpness, too. But I think that one's not an automatic headshot.
No, that one cuts your limbs off.
It could cut your head off, but it could also cut your
That was
limbs.
A frequent... There's a lot of monsters back in the day. No, not a lot, but I mean, there was more than you would expect who... I remember like in the old Monsters compendiums and stuff where it's like their bite acts as a sword of sharpness and stuff like that. Do you remember that?
The Tarrasque.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. All of its teeth were considered swords of sharpness.
Yeah.
Or vorpal weapons, one or the other. And then its horns were considered weapons of wounding.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the 5e Tarrasque is a slouch, but yeah, compared to older editions, it's like, come on.
It's kind of a candy ass compared to the original.
Yeah.
And like the only way to kill it was you had to wish it. You had to kill it and then wish it dead.
Yeah, I still use that. Do you remember that? One of my favorite Dragon magazine articles was all about cults, and there was like the Wakers of the Beast. Do you remember that? Was like a prestige class for people that were just like insane cultists that wanted to awaken.
There was one for Tarrasque. There was one for Beholders.
Medusa, UNT, and Mind Flayers. Yeah, I think it was like I want to say like issue 141 maybe. Yeah, I just always thought that was awesome. I miss that magazine. Even though we make our own stuff like that now, it was just fun.
Yeah. Well,
it was simpler times when there wasn't 500,000 people making their own magazines. And stuff.
I will say, like with Volo's Guide, the monsters got significantly better. As they felt more in line with the challenge rating.
Yeah, I don't know. I like many things. I just think like I find myself enjoying like coming back around to enjoying like the base game and the base, and again, like a lot of the writing I do on the site, we always, Robin and Stephen do too, we try to like use examples from the basic rules so that it's just more accessible to people. And I don't know, I kind of feel, I think they're pretty, like I was looking at that vampire today and I'm like, this is pretty, if you use all their ability. I guess it's like they were saying they basically just like dummy proofed or Homer Simpsonized things with Masters of the Multiverse. Because it's like, well, there was a way to, like in that interview or whatever on the D&D channel, it's just like, well, basically DMs just weren't doing the right thing with them, so we just made it easier. Like with the monsters, but it's like there's a golden path through them. It's like they mess you up, dude. Look at Critical Role. I mean, we were talking about beforehand with the Briarwoods. Like I watched that fight play out, and it's like he probably had a few tricks, but it was just basically a vampire lord and a necromancer, and took on like 7 people at once. They have a lot of abilities.
And a cool ass sword.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you're a critter. Is that sword something? Because like.
Oh yeah. If you really want to laugh, actually look up. I forget the name of the sword, but there was a scene where Grog was like in an outhouse, and the sword started talking to him and stuff, and like Scanlan was outside. Somebody animated. It's pretty funny. Oh. Because it was like a sentient evil sword that wanted it was basically like a Black Razor-ish sort of thing that needed to like kill.
Yeah, it was definitely giving off those vibes.
Drink blood, like absorb the blood and stuff.
Yeah.
I believe it eventually captured Grog's soul, and they had to like go get it or something like that, or save him. It was like catatonic. Had to fight some kind of spirit of the sword or whatever. Like you do.
It's only a soul. Do you really need it?
But yeah, somebody animated it. How people used to do that. I haven't seen them in a while, actually, but like Critical Role animateds. Craven Edge, that was it. Thanks, Andre. Which I believe was an analog for like, I see something to do with Vecna, like it had to do because they were, the whispered one is Vecna. Yeah. I'm sure they're just not using Vecna because it's probably don't want to pay Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, why pay them when you don't have to?
Yeah, I think it was an anagram for, an anagram for something to do with Vecna because that was like an early seeds.
Or was it the Sword of Kaz, right? Doesn't that hate Vecna too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I read this. So there was a trilogy that I read. I won't say what it was, so then it can't be a spoiler. Where basically the main character is like trying to get his soul back or keep from losing his soul throughout the whole thing, and it's like at the very end he's kind of like, meh, I guess I don't really need a soul after all.
It's Vecna greed, is what that is a anagram of.
Oh. And that's just
look at Matt Mercer laying the seeds for the campaign finale in like episode 30, or I mean that was long before they were dealing with Vecna coming back.
That is the long game. But that being said, right?
That's why he's a good DM, man.
I don't think planning out from then to the end that it's Vecna is the part that makes like for a good GM, because I would say that hindsight's 20/20, so it's really easy to pick things like that out from your games and cast them forward, right, and use them. And it seems like you planned it all along.
Oh, no, it does. Like that ziggurat beneath the Whitestone is like where it comes back into play later on. Like that's
Well, I'm not specifically saying Matt or what Matt's done, but I'm saying like it's a fairly easy technique to use. You can take things that have already happened and it's so that it feels like you were foreshadowing them back then. And weave them into the story in the future.
Yeah, interesting connection to that my Sunday game. So like, the plot was getting a little noodly for me. Like even I was starting to like, wait, why is this? Like too many things were like, connected to each other. And I had said something like when we were just chatting once, and afterwards I was like, yeah, I think I messed up and said blah blah blah. And I was like, that didn't make sense. And like the players were like, oh no, I just figured like, then like they had this whole like Pepe Sylvia, like this guy and this guy. I was just like, it was just like one of those GM learning moments where it's just like, man, players like they'll just like, go all in and, kind of like fill in the gaps themselves or make it make sense sometimes if, so I was like, I shouldn't have said anything. Now they think, I messed up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Not because you messed up or anything like that. Just because had you been a little more patient, they might have told you what they were thinking, and then you could have weaved it back in.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like too many convenient connections, but like they seemed like to me. But they were all like, "Oh yeah, wow! I just figured like this guy and that place and this company you mentioned and all that."
For most things in life, I just like to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the long run, it just works out much easier, especially in a D&D game, because it's like we're only in these characters for a few hours at a time, and
Mm-hmm.
like and many of my games, we're not even playing weekly, so like remembering what happened last time is such a struggle.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Never mind. That's
So
it. Some
we were
wise words.
uh, so we were at the hour mark, but we'll be back tomorrow night with Nobody's Heroes, and then Friday for the
Woo!
live chat at noon. And then we'll be back again next week talking about something else. So until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.